For many designers and engineers, it can be common to be in receipt of a survey drawing that contains no elevation data whatsoever. So this is basically information that's all elevated at 0. This is a good example of that particular type of data. So here we have text and we have spot elevations that are on a layer of points, but as you can see there, the elevation is at 0. We do happen to have some lines that have been drawn here in with elevations at the start and the end, but really what we're after are some elevations using these particular spot points. Now in Civil Site Design version 24 found in Toolspace, we have an option to now create these, and if we click on the little points button down the bottom here, we can click on Convert Objects to Cogo. This will do a couple of things. It will actually create Cogo points at the specific location we determine, and it will try and use elevation data that again we can specify. So let's go ahead here and pick the layer on which the points are residing, just simply by clicking. We can also use the little pull down here to go and pick the layer. We then choose the object type. So what is this object? Well, it's a point. In the pull down we have single line text, multi-line text, a block reference which could contain attributes, and a point. So we're going to go ahead and click point. Now we want to derive the elevations from some text which is close to this particular point. So we certainly don't want to be using the object Z because that is 0. We won't be using the text contents because we're not actually selecting text as the object. If we had a block, we could choose an attribute, which we'll look at shortly. In our case, we're going to find the nearest text and then tell it what layer this nearest text is on. So just simply picking it within the drawing. The descriptions gives you a few options. So in our case, when we're using the find nearest text, it will simply default to text contents, which means it's going to read that text and assign the elevation from it. We actually have the option, if we're using an attribute, to tell it the name of the attribute to derive the elevations. We can use find nearest text in here and actually override the layer. Now we've already done that on the elevations tab, so we're not going to be picking that. The last thing we can do in here is change the description of the Cogo point which will be created, and if you want to change that you can do, but would recommend you just leave it as that for the time being. So the intention with this is that it's going to be creating Cogo points. Now you're maybe not particularly interested about how these Cogo points are displayed and how they're presented in point groups, etc. You're more interested in maybe creating the surface. So for the purposes of the way that the point actually looks, we're simply going to pick a very simple point style, which is PZD from our standard library, and we're going to leave the code set table as it is. All you need to do is click on Create Cogo Points. In the drawing, a couple of things will happen. First of all, the Cogo points will be created in the drawing environment, and a Civil Site Design surface will also be created. So it's important to recognize these objects are Civil Site Design objects. These are not, for example, Civil 3D Cogo points or Civil 3D surfaces. If for whatever reason you need to go and make an adjustment to a point, for example if you want to remove it, you can just left click on it and hit the delete key, or use your erase function to remove that particular point. If there is a positional change required or an elevational change required to that Cogo point, you can left click on your Cogo point. You'll need to zoom in at this point, hover over the circle grip, and you'll find something called Set Dynamic Position. This will do two things. It'll let you change the position of the Cogo point, so if you do for whatever reason grip edit these and move them around, they will reposition back to this position specified here. So if you want to change that, you can click on the picker tool and adjust the point to a new position as you see fit. And in regards to the elevation, where it's got specified elevation, you simply go in and change that. So we may change that to 6.09. Once you've done that, you click apply, and that point will automatically change and is now fixed to that particular location, meaning that if you do accidentally move it, it will automatically reset. So where are these points managed? Well, if we head over to the tool space, you'll see that the CSD surfaces and the point groups pullouts are now populated. If for whatever reason they are not populated, you can click on this little refresh button here to update. So under Civil Site Design Surfaces, we have a surface called Survey Surface. If we right click, we can go to Surface Manager and have a look at that. So what you'll find is that because this is a surface that's been generated using Cogo points, that the inputs are completely empty. Okay, so let's have a look at where the input comes from. Let's close this down. It's created using a point group. So if we right click on point groups underneath here, click on point groups, we're taken to our point group form. So all that's happening here is any point with the description NS, which we briefly looked at earlier, is automatically being put into a pot called, or a group called contourable surface, and a surface is being created. If for whatever reason you wanted to have a completely different surface name, all you need to do is to remove or change that. Click on Update, then click on Close. Now what we won't do is delete the original surface there, so if you do want to delete Survey Surface, you can go ahead and remove it. But what is important here is that we have a live surface using those CSD Cogo points and is being updated. Now, if you want to add or append additional information to the surface, all we need to do is go to the surface itself, click on Surface Manager, and if we want to remove the connection between it and the Cogo points, we can click on Disconnect Reference Surface. This will remove any association with the Cogo points. We'll do that now. Then we may want to add our break lines. So we'll go to Break Lines, click on the layer pull down, click 3D Lines, click on Add, and then what we'll do is simply click on Build Surface. Now we can see the original survey surface still in the background, so maybe we don't want to see that anymore. We can just hover using the grip and turn off the contours. So using Convert Objects to Cogo, we can very quickly build a surface from 2D data for beginning work on our project. If you're a Civil 3D platform user and you would like to now share this surface back to Civil 3D, we would recommend that you do this using XML only. We don't recommend that you use the Civil 3D Surfaces option. So if you head over to the Surface Manager, you can export this particular surface using XML. And the reason for this is because all of that information, points and break lines, will be transferred, whereas the Civil 3D Surfaces tool only transfers break line data only.